Today, we continue to learn the particular advantages related to Dharma. If you carefully examine your own mind to determine whether you are free from the 16 additional conditions and possess all 18 freedoms and advantages, you will realize that obtaining even the basic 8 freedoms and 10 advantages is very challenging. Acquiring all 8 freedoms is relatively easy. For example, you are not a being in a lower realm or a long-lived God in this life, and the 4 states of freedom as a human are not difficult to attain. However, obtaining all 10 advantages is more difficult, and very few people possess all of them. Why is this the case? First, let's consider the 5 individual advantages. While for most Buddhists it is not difficult to be born as a human with all their faculties intact and live in a central region, if they become involved in a lifestyle conflicting with the Dharma, such as those born in communities of hunters or prostitutes, or those who reject the law of karma and lack faith in the Dharma, then they only possess 3 of the 5 individual advantages. This is akin to a car with 4 tires. If 3 of them are in good condition, but 1 tire is flat, the car cannot run on a highway. Similarly, if a person possesses 3 individual advantages, but holds wrong views or lacks belief in Buddhism, there is no opportunity for them to embrace the Dharma. If a Buddhist fulfills one of 2 conditions, either avoiding a lifestyle conflicting with the Dharma or having faith in the Dharma, they would possess 4 of the 5 individual advantages. However, would it be possible for them to practice the Dharma? The answer is no. Even if a person does not commit severe wrongdoings, such as slandering the Dharma or destroying Buddhism, if any of their thoughts, speech, and actions are negative, or their motivation for positive actions, such as meditation, recitation, circumambulation, and pilgrimage, is only for this life, their lifestyle is still considered to be in conflict with the Dharma, even if they have the reputation of being a good and learned individual. I've encountered several so-called great masters whose discussions and actions mostly revolve around worldly matters. When the topic of rebirth is brought up, they don't show much concern and argue that one should strive for success in this life rather than the next, even if rebirth does exist. Many Dharma teachers hold the same viewpoint. Numerous ordinary people turn to Buddhism seeking peace, family harmony, promotion, or wealth. So their actions are solely for the benefit of this life. As a result, even if a person is a highly respected monk, a prominent lay practitioner, a generous donor, or a great philanthropist, they still lead a lifestyle in conflict with the Dharma. Why? Because their goal only pertains to this life, and it is impossible for renunciation and bodhicitta to arise in their mind. Each of you, whether you are a monastic or a lay practitioner, should reflect on this. Why am I studying the Dharma? If your goal is to seek safety in this life, or to escape from troubles, or if you don't even have a particular goal and live your life mindlessly, then you are not pursuing liberation in a future life. In such cases, even if you are recognized as a great master, you don't even have the advantage of having no conflicting lifestyle. Among the 10 particular advantages, this issue may be hard for many people to avoid, so we have to carefully reflect on it over and over again. It is really necessary to give teachings on the words of my perfect teacher this time, and I hope Buddhists will understand this specific teaching. Studying the Dharma or performing a Buddhist ritual as a mere formality is not worthy of praise. We compliment someone for being a real practitioner. Otherwise, it has little meaning to live a life occupied solely with the benefits of this very lifetime. The great Jigme Phuntsuk Rinpoche often taught us, between this life and next, I place more importance on the next life. although I dare not say that what I do is 100% for the next life. The majority of it is for the liberation of the future life. Therefore, a practitioner should place more importance on the next life than this life. You may check yourself to see whether you are after this life or the future life. Between these two, which math symbol will you use to express the relative importance? Equal, greater than, or less than? The statement that seeking the benefits of this life is a conflicting lifestyle might be a blow to many people, so it deserves our deep reflection. As humans, one of our greatest differences from other beings is our capacity for self-reflection. Without this capacity, we are no different from an animal that only knows to eat grass and drink water without the cognitive ability for reflection and discernment. A human must reflect on their deeds. For example, thinking, I have been a monastic for many years, so what is the ultimate purpose for me studying the Dharma? If your goal is just for this life, then you are living a conflicting lifestyle, which you shouldn't be doing. You should aim for the liberation of your future lives. Otherwise, if you only focus on this life that lasts only a few decades, you are too short-sighted. You should think, I am pursuing liberation, so fame and wealth are of no value to me. Next, we should check the 5 circumstantial advantages. Among these 5, although a Buddha has come, has taught the Dharma, and the teachings have not yet disappeared, if a person has not entered the Dharma, then they only have 3 of those advantages. If a person doesn't enter the Dharma, there is no point in being accepted by a compassionate, qualified teacher. Therefore, this person lacks 2 of the 5 circumstantial advantages. As a result, it is impossible for them to succeed in the practice of Dharma. Someone has entered the Dharma and been accepted by a qualified teacher, but their mind remains unsettled and wavering. Once they lose interest in the Dharma, it is unrealistic to constrain them to the path through external forces. At a certain point, their camouflage of being Buddhists will fall off, and their true character will be revealed. Therefore, both monastics and householders should have a deep understanding of the Dharma. If a person constantly relies on reminders from the teacher or fellow practitioners and lacks solid faith in the 3 jewels, it is uncertain whether they may stay in the Sangha or not. Entering the Dharma does not simply mean seemingly asking for some teaching and being given it. Many people think they are real Buddhists because they have a refuge certificate, a Dharma name, and have received empowerments or teachings in front of such and such teachers. Well, this is not necessarily so. Why? It is because the teachings of the basic and great vehicles have not been integrated into their actions, and their mind hasn't generated the corresponding beliefs. Therefore, even if they think they are Buddhists, it may not be the case. Once I asked a taxi driver, "Do you believe in Buddhism?" "Yes, I do," he replied. I asked, "How can you tell?" "See," he pointed to the pendant in his car, "I have an image of Avalokiteshvara here, which shows I believe in Buddhism." "What else can prove you are a Buddhist?" I asked. "Nothing else. Anyway, I pray to Avalokiteshvara for protection, so I am a Buddhist," he said. Strictly speaking, he is not a Buddhist because he doesn't even know whether Avalokiteshvara is a god, a Buddha, or a bodhisattva, and the reason he prays is to pick up more passengers so he can earn a bit more money. There are many such Buddhists as the taxi driver, including some monastics who just muddle along. Some individuals join a Buddhist group after encountering setbacks in life, but they neither have faith in the Buddha nor generate renunciation from samsara. Are these individuals Buddhists? Well, they are just Buddhists by name, but not in essence. Many people like the statement, "The truth is always the truth." But is the truth you are referring to merely a conceptual thought or an actual reality? If it is just conceptual, then for sure it is not the real truth. Similarly, a Buddhist who adheres only to the concept of being a Buddhist is not a real Buddhist. Why? Because the beliefs in basic and great vehicles have not arisen in their minds. From the perspective of the basic vehicle, a real practitioner who seeks liberation must have the conviction that everything in samsara is meaningless and no different from a dream or an illusion. The Lotus Sutra says, "There is no safety in the threefold world. It is like a burning house, replete with a multitude of sufferings, truly to be feared, constantly beset with the griefs and pains of birth, old age, sickness, and death, which are like fires raging fiercely and without cease." If you have such a conviction, it means you have generated genuine renunciation. Of course, we shouldn't just pay lip service. We should feel this conviction from the bottom of our heart, feeling this urgency in the same way a prisoner wants to be freed from prison as soon as possible. Wherever we are in samsara, be it in the God realm or the human realm, when we generate such a conviction, it means genuine renunciation has arisen in us. As long as you can recognize the illusory nature of samsara by any means, be it following the Guru's instructions or relying on another spiritual friend's assistance, it is acceptable. Once upon a time, a monk had a magician friend. Once, when they were chatting over tea, the monk asked the magician, "I want to see the illusion you create. Can you perform it?" The magician said nothing and went outside and brought back a tall steed, saying, "Do you want this horse? I can sell it to you." Noticing it was really a nice horse, the monk asked, "What a horse? How much?" Back then, many Tibetan monastics liked horses, just as monks today like cars. The magician said, "You can ride the horse to give it a test, and then we can talk about the price." Without thinking too much, the monk mounted the horse and took the reins the magician handed to him. Then, the magician gave the horse a hard pat on its rump. The horse rushed out like an arrow. It leaped over mountains, valleys, grasslands, and rivers. After traveling afar for several days and nights, the horse threw the monk on an unfamiliar open field and disappeared without looking back. After a long journey through mountains and rivers, the monk finally trekked out of the wilderness and arrived at a village. Since he knew nobody, he became a beggar and servant, endured many sufferings, and lived like a stray dog for many days. Later, the monk disrobed and married a local woman. They had 3 children, whom they brought up with innumerable worries and hardships. However, the former monk didn't expect that their children would grow up to be rebellious and disrespectful, which really upset him. To take care of his family, he had to hunt, oblivious of the pain he experienced and the negative actions he committed. Living such a life, he gradually grew old. One day, he went hunting on a mountain as usual. After walking for a long time, at the lowest point of the mountain ridge, he found a mother antelope that had just given birth to a calf. The antelope was very weak and could barely walk. He ruthlessly killed the mother and the calf and then limped home with the dead antelopes on his back, using his gun as a crutch. When he reached the other side of the river near his home, his youngest son was very happy to see him coming back with the catch. He called out, "Daddy," and ran toward him. The son accidentally slipped off the bridge, fell into the river, and was immediately swept away by the current. The older sister and brother noticed their brother's fall, so they both recklessly jumped into the river to save him, and unfortunately, they were both swept away as well. His wife witnessed all of this, wailing. Then, without hesitation, she jumped into the river. Witnessing how his whole family was swept away in the river in the blink of an eye, the man was so heartbroken that he fainted to the ground. He didn't know how long it took him to regain consciousness. He leaned against his gun and tried to get up, but he fell down again. Then suddenly, he felt as if he was waking up to daylight. He realized that he was still in his magician friend's house, with a stick in his hand, and that he was lying on the ground. The magician smiled and said to him, "Get up for some tea." He got up and found that the tea he had been sipping before was still hot. He gazed in awe. He had experienced the ups and downs of his whole life in just a few minutes. He couldn't believe it, and it took him a while to regain his composure. Recalling the joys and sorrows brought by the hallucinations, he deeply felt that there was no real meaning in samsara. So he generated strong renunciation. He thus renounced everything in his worldly life and retreated to a mountain to practice diligently with unwavering determination. Finally, he became a great enlightened one. Therefore, illusions, as told in the story, can help us recognize the true nature of samsara. I notice that many Dharma students like to watch TV when visiting an urban area. Through the stories on TV, maybe they realize the nature of samsara. Or maybe they generate greed, anger, and other afflictions. Nevertheless, when you really generate renunciation, you will never envy anything in the world, including fame, social status, or beautiful objects. This is the basic requirement for Theravada practitioners. As for Mahayana practitioners who have embarked on the path of the great vehicle, the essential thing is to have genuinely aroused bodhicitta with the aspiration to benefit all sentient beings. Although it is not easy for us to cultivate genuine renunciation and bodhicitta, at the very least, we must have unwavering faith in the teacher and the three precious jewels. This faith should remain steadfast, even in the face of risking our lives. Without that, simply reciting prayers and wearing yellow robes doesn't necessarily make us true Buddhists. When teaching us the great perfection of Manjushri, the great Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche explained that refuge means surrender in worldly terms. On the face of it, surrender doesn't seem to be a nice word, but in fact, this word implies that while you are fighting against afflictions, if you always think, "The three jewels are always my only refuge and protection, from now on, whatever happens to me, favorable or unfavorable, pleasant or painful, good or bad, I have no other refuge nor protection except you. You are my only protector, my only guide, my only shelter, and my only hope." With such a conviction, you sincerely surrender to the three jewels. This is the so-called refuge. Anytime and anywhere, you should always determine to take refuge in the three jewels. For some people, taking refuge is just receiving a certificate or having a dharma name. But when encountering a tiny obstacle, they easily give up the three jewels. At that time, let alone taking refuge, some monastics even take off their monastic robes, which is terrible. There was a Gelug Geshe near Lhasa named Nwang Phuntsok, and people normally called him Gen Lam Rinpa or Geshe Lam Rim. He passed away a few years ago and left quite a few works. I am fortunate to have read his books and was deeply touched. In 1959, while he was in retreat in a mountain cave with 7 disciples, he was arrested and imprisoned for no reason. While he was doing forced labor, the jailer ordered him to remove his monastic robes, but Gen Lam Rinpa firmly refused, saying, "I can give you my life, but I will never take off my robes." Then in the 1960s, during the time of the Cultural Revolution, the Red Guards coerced him to burn Buddhist scriptures, but Gen Lam Rinpa said in front of everyone, "You can arrest me and shoot me dead. As a monk, there is no way for me to burn the scriptures." His unflinching bravery under such abusive and oppressive circumstances is truly admirable. As for us, now that we are living a happy life, we think we are good Buddhists. But when we encounter hardships and obstacles, will we still remain faithful to the three jewels? Will we still think, "The three jewels are my only protection"? I don't have any regrets, even if I have to lose my life for the 3 jewels. Each Buddhist should reflect on this. If you don't have such a level of determination, even if you shave off your head, put on monastic robes, and appear dignified, or even if others praise you saying you are a great monk, a great Dharma master, or a great Khenpo, you still cannot be regarded as a true Buddhist. Some householders appear very devoted. They always recite sutras, prostrate, release lives, and participate in charities. Such deeds indeed have merit. But if your faith in the 3 jewels is only skin deep and doesn't sink into the mind, you may not be a true Buddhist yet. It's like when you chant the name of Buddha Shakyamuni in front of ants. It helps plant the seed of liberation in the ants. But does it mean the ants are Buddhists? Of course not. So strictly speaking, some of you may not be a Buddhist yet, although you shaved off your head and have taken ordination years ago. You may think you're a Buddhist or even a Mahayanist, but you are only qualified as a Buddhist if you never even think of abandoning the 3 jewels when you encounter major obstacles. I often remind you to generate bodhicitta. If not that, at least you should generate renunciation. And if not that, at least you should have uncontrived faith in the 3 jewels. If you have none of these 3, you are not a true Buddhist because you don't even meet the basic requirements for a Buddhist. This paragraph is so important that you must keep it in mind and use it as a mirror to see whether you meet the requirements for a Mahayana practitioner or a Theravada practitioner, or you are just a so-so Buddhist. If you are not even a Buddhist, then who are you exactly? A Tirthika? Well, you may not believe in another religion. Then you are neither a Buddhist nor a Tirthika, so you have to belong to a 3rd category. Make sure that you know how to identify each of these freedoms and advantages, and to check whether you have them yourself. This is of crucial importance. However, many people don't know this, so they focus on the 8 worldly concerns every day and squander their precious human lives. What a pity. There is a Chinese story. In the Ming Dynasty, there was a man named Luo Hongxian who was very talented. He became Zhuangwan, or the top scorer, in his 20s on the government exam to select official posts and was appointed afterward. It was much harder to be the top scorer at that time than to be admitted by top Chinese universities like Tsinghua University or Beijing University. Luo was a man of integrity. After witnessing the dark corruption in the government, he felt the impermanence of life, so he resigned from his government position, lived in seclusion, and eventually became a monk. He was referred to as Monk Zhuangwan. After taking ordination in a monastery, Luo pretended to be slow-witted, and he was willing to take on the toughest manual labor, including chopping wood, carrying water, making fires, and cooking. He did all kinds of manual labor to tame and hone his mind. 13 years passed in this way. Before his ordination, he had a wife and a son. 13 years later, his son became the Zhuangyuan as well. Both the father and the son were top scorers, which was such a rare thing that everybody was talking about it. Meanwhile, his wife and son really missed him, but there was no news about Luo after his ordination, so they didn't know where to find him. Perhaps because his family missed him so much, one day Luo suddenly had the idea of paying a visit home, so he returned to his hometown. When Luo was standing in front of the door of his mansion, a servant thought he was just a monk begging for alms, so he went inside to inform Luo's wife. His wife had a kind heart, so she asked the servant to offer him a bucket of rice. Luo refused to take the rice and requested to see the mansion owner. The servant thought Luo was a greedy monk, so he went inside and informed the wife. The wife sent the servant to give him some money. Again, Luo refused to accept it. He asked for an ink brush and paper and wrote a poem that said, "I don't accept your rice and money. I left 13 years ago and now I visit my hometown. Your offspring has their own merit. Please don't be like a horse and a cow to serve them. This poem is also applicable to many people today. They spend their whole lives toiling for children and grandchildren instead of studying the Dharma. As such, they squander their life every day. Actually, their offspring has their own merit, if they have a lot of merit. You don't have to worry about them. If they have little merit, it is useless for you to worry about them. So, make sure you don't just toil like a horse or a cow in this life, just for your children. The servant presented the poem to Lo's wife. She was surprised and rushed out to the door after reading it. However, Lo had already left. The wife immediately sent people to look for him everywhere but couldn't find him. Later, Lo followed Chan master Longku in Fujian, practiced Chan and the Pure Land diligently, and eventually attained realization. Feeling sympathy for worldly people who were still deluded, he composed the Gathas of Awakening, which was widely circulated. One of his verses is, "I advise you to embark on the path of practice as soon as possible, because once you lose the human life, it'll be hard to regain it even after millions of kalpas." As evident from this verse, the teaching on the difficulty of finding the freedoms and advantages is also particularly emphasized in Chinese Buddhism. In summary, the above teaching is about the nature of freedom and the advantages related to Dharma. I hope everyone will meditate on this properly. Reflecting on images that show how difficult it is to find the freedoms and advantages. The Buddha said in sutras, including the Mahayana Noble Flower Sutra, the Sutra of Nanda's Going Forth, an application of mindfulness of the sacred Dharma, that it is more difficult for a being to obtain a human life than for a turtle to accidentally put its head through the opening of a wooden yoke while being tossed around by huge waves on the surface after coming up from the depths of the ocean. Imagine the vast expanse of the cosmos, consisting of 1 billion universes, as an immense ocean. Drifting upon this ocean is a yoke, a wooden object with a hole in it that can be fastened around the horns of draft oxen. This yoke is continuously tossed about by the waves, sometimes moving eastward, sometimes westward, and never remaining in one place for even a moment. Deep within the depths of the ocean resides a blind turtle who only emerges to the surface once every 100 years. The chances of the yoke and the turtle crossing paths are incredibly slim. Furthermore, the yoke itself is lifeless, and the turtle is not actively seeking it out. Due to its blindness, the turtle lacks the ability to spot the yoke with its non-functional eyes. Even if the turtle had eyes to see, and the yoke had the intention to seek for the turtle, it would still be extremely difficult for the turtle and the yoke to meet in the vast ocean. This is just an assumption, explaining how difficult it is to obtain a human birth. If there were a blind turtle and a yoke in the ocean, although it is extremely hard for them to meet, we still cannot completely negate the chance of their meeting. Even if we adopt the 3 modes of logic in Buddhist logic, we still cannot bring up sufficient evidence proving they will never meet. If the yoke were to stay in one place, there might be a chance of them meeting. However, it is constantly moving. If the turtle spent all its time swimming on the surface, it might, perhaps, cross paths with the yoke. But its surface is only once every 100 years. Therefore, the chances of the yoke and the turtle coming together are extremely small. Nevertheless, by sheer chance, the turtle might still slip its neck into the yoke. However, according to the sutras, it is even more difficult than that to obtain a human life with the freedoms and advantages. Please don't think this is just a tale or a saying. Instead, we should reflect on its meaning in our mind. While giving a teaching, a Dharma master used the analogy of a blind turtle meeting a yoke to explain the difficulty of obtaining the human birth. A child heard this and felt inspired To verify the meeting is indeed very hard, he went back home, drilled a hole in a board, and threw it into the pool near his house. He wanted to test the analogy in person, so he jumped into the pool. Although he often surfaced to look for the board and tried to put his head through the hole, he always failed to do so because the board was swaying in the water. Then he generated more faith in the Buddha's words, thinking, "The ocean is vast and deep with huge waves. The wooden yoke has such a small hole, and the turtle is blind and only surfaces once every 100 years, so there is hardly any chance for their meeting. Now the pool I stay in is narrow with small waves, and I have 2 eyes and surface all the time. But I still cannot pass through the opening of the board, let alone the blind turtle in the vast ocean." Then the child recited a verse. "It is extremely hard for a blind turtle to meet a wooden yoke. It is as hard for a being in the lower realm to regain a human birth. Now I aspire to take ordination and leave the prison of the 3 kinds of existence. If I constantly and skillfully practice the Dharma, it's certain that I will attain liberation." This verse is like an instruction from an achieved master. It is very well written. Later, the child took his ordination in a monastery and always meditated on the difficulty of finding the freedoms and advantages. Eventually, he attained realization. To those of you who have an affinity with Dharma, you may realize this analogy from the sutras is just so good. If you go to the sea, you may take the opportunity to reflect on this analogy of the difficulty of finding the freedoms and advantages. Of course, if you only commit wrongdoings every day and you study no Dharma, your human life is not necessarily precious, as Milarepa told the hunter Gonpo Dorje. The Buddha says it is rare and precious to attain a human form, but when I meet people like you, I don't feel your human life is that precious. Therefore, a human life committing vices is not precious. A human life performing virtues is indeed very rare and precious. Especially through this analogy, we should understand that it is extremely hard to regain a human life from a lower realm. Some instructional texts further extend this analogy. The blind turtle symbolizes us, beings of these 3 lower realms. The fact that the turtle only rises to the surface once every 100 years symbolizes the difficulty of escaping from the lower realms. The ocean symbolizes the depth and vastness of the 3 lower realms and their infinite sufferings. Even if a being occasionally is reborn in the celestial realm or the Asura's realm, it is impossible for him to encounter the authentic Dharma and a qualified teacher. Therefore, you should carefully contemplate this analogy when you meditate. It is when you truly generate the conviction about the difficulty of finding the freedoms and advantages that your practice of the uncommon preliminaries, including prostration and mandala offering, will become easier and more willing. Such a conviction becomes your motivation, so you are willing to engage in practice. If you don't have this conviction, you will instead regard running a business, earning money, or sleeping in as more important. When I was in the hospital, I met a doctor who had to commute 2 or 3 hours to work every morning. I asked her, "Aren't you tired? It's a long journey, 2 or 3 hours in the morning and another 2 or 3 hours back home at night, but you always arrive on time." She replied, "Well, it is tiring, but I can handle it. It's hard to find a job now. My current job is so precious that however tiring it is for me, I won't give it up. As long as I get up a bit earlier, it'll be all right. Every morning, I buy a steamed bun as my breakfast and eat it while taking a bus. There is no problem." If we feel the preciousness of our human life in the way she feels about her job, we can definitely get up early in the morning and have no interest in busy worldly chores. With such motivation, there will be no problem accomplishing any of our Dharma practice. By contrast, if we don't feel the difficulty of finding the freedoms and advantages, Even if we've heard it from the teacher or read it from the sutras, we will still enjoy sleeping in, and we will always procrastinate doing our practice with the excuse of being busy. We will feel our career is more important and practice is insignificant, which means our value system is entirely inverted. Driven by such values, we won't engage in diligent practice in our short lifespan. We were busy and deluded in the past, and we will be busy and deluded in the future, without freedoms, advantages, and clarity. Nagarjuna expresses the difficulty of finding the freedoms and advantages in letter to a friend, since even more difficult than the meeting of a turtle, and the hole in a solitary yoke located on the ocean is the attainment of a human state from that of a creeping creature. Make that attainment with human faculties be fruitful through practicing the hallowed Dharma. It is extremely hard for a blind turtle to go through the opening of a wooden yoke in the sea. It is even harder for beings in the 3 lower realms to attain a human life. That said, King Surabhibhadra, you should practice the authentic Dharma to make your precious human life fruitful. Shantideva says in The Way of the Bodhisattva, "This is why Lord Buddha has declared that like a turtle that perchance can place its head within a yoke adrift upon the mighty sea, this human birth is difficult to find. It says in the application of mindfulness of the sacred Dharma, attaining a human life is as difficult as a turtle going through a yoke tossed about on a sea." His turtle and yoke analogy is mentioned in many Buddhist scriptures, so it bears a very profound meaning. Whenever you see the sea, a turtle, or a yoke, you should think of this analogy and contemplate often the rarity of human life. However, due to their lack of practice, many people these days only consider this analogy as a tale and think it has nothing to do with them. In fact, it is most relevant to each of us, and we should feel the connection. But for those who have never practiced, this analogy is just pure words unrelated to them, and the meaning cannot infiltrate their minds. Even if the meaning does occasionally appear in their minds, it won't stay. Only those who practice well can truly realize how precious it is to attain a human rebirth. As a result, they won't want to squander their lives, so they will devote all their time and effort to practices that benefit their next lives. Therefore, we should check the state of our mind. If we have conviction about the rarity and difficulty of finding the freedoms and advantages, then other practices, such as meditating on the impermanence of life, will develop easily. If we don't think human life is precious and rare, then it is certain our practice is not good. Because of this, I ask you to do retreat for 100 days so you can focus on the common preliminaries. After the retreat, if you have generated conviction about the rarity and difficulty of finding the freedoms and advantages, and you have realized you shouldn't squander your life and you should practice diligently, this will be of great lifelong benefit to you. The retreat is successful even if you have not attained a divine vision, seen Buddha Samantabhadra or Bodhisattva Manjushri, or dreamt a Dharma king offering you a prophecy. So for now, please try your very best to attain the states of ngondro practice. Otherwise, it is truly unfortunate that despite wearing monastic robes, you are not considered a true Buddhist at the moment of death. It is even more disheartening that you immediately descend into a lower realm as soon as you close your eyes. Given how swiftly our lives pass by, this is a great pity. The Nirvana Sutra and other texts make comparisons to illustrate the difficulty of obtaining a human life. For example, they compare it to getting dried peas to stick to a smooth wall or balancing a pile of peas on the tip of an upright needle. These comparisons emphasize the immense difficulty of attaining human birth.